So the Gestalt principles is a set of 7 principles, which was developed in the 1920s by a group of German psychologists. So why do we use this principle? Because when we look at something, the way our brain processes information is like this. So it looks for structure, it looks for logic, it looks for patterns. Okay. And when we organize information by adhering to these principles, it helps users to gather insights more easily. Okay. In some places, they refer to this as cognitive overload. Okay. So in my previous company, so we had an app, right? And when designing the app, the UX, UI guys will always talk about this concept of reducing the cognitive overload on the user, which basically means making the workflow or the user's usage of the app or the website more easier. Okay. So these concepts of Gestalt principles are useful in designing dashboards, user interface or user experiences, and also in infographics, so like what you see in newspapers and so on, right? So in all of these design oriented subjects, it is very useful. So one thing that the Gestalt principle helps you achieve is something called as the synergy effect. Okay, you might have heard about this quotation. They say the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So I'm sure you would have seen this picture before. This is the logo of the Unilever company. Now essentially what this logo contains a lot of symbols. Okay, and each of these symbols represents something that the company produces or something that the company stands for. So for example, here you see a Dove symbol, right? So this, I think that the Dove brand itself is product of Unilever. And similarly, if you see here, you can see a symbol of a plant over here in this place. So they are big on sustainability and eco-friendly manufacturing and so on. So they want to emphasize that point. So they have included this symbol of a plant. So like this logo is essentially a collection of pictures or collection of icons that the company stands for. But when we look at this logo, it's not the symbols that we look at, but rather we look at this U, and then we say U stands for Unilever. So that's how our brain processes this logo. Okay. So here, if I'm just applying this principle over here, some of its parts, right? Parts are nothing but this Dove symbol or this plant symbol and so on. So these are the parts. But when we put these parts together, we don't view them just as a collection of individual symbols, but rather as a single letter U. Okay. For more information on the logo or what each of these symbols means, you can go to this website and you can check out the information. But essentially, when I say the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, this is what we mean. Though there are this picture is made up of individual components, when we look at it, we tend to process everything as one single unit and derive some additional information from it. That's it. Now another example here, what you see here, right? It is just a collection of spots. Okay, but when we look at this GIF picture, what we think is, okay, it's like a dog walking. Okay, or more precisely, a Dalmatian breed of a dog that is walking. Okay, and just to emphasize more on this, when I put this picture, so anyway, at any time when you paste a picture in Microsoft PowerPoint, it will give you something called as alt text. Okay, and it will give a computer generated caption for the picture that you have pasted. Okay, in this case, when I pasted this picture over here on the slide, it said this is a picture containing a group of black dots. Okay, so that is how the computer processes this information. But when we as humans look at this picture, we know that it is not just a group of dots, but it is a dog walking. Okay, so that is because we tend to fill in these gaps over here, and then we say, okay, if you join all these gaps over here, then it is not just a group of dots, but it is an animal. Okay, so this is how, when we look at a picture, we don't just view isolated pieces of information, but we tend to combine everything and view it as a collection of points. Okay. So the key here in the concept of the Gestalt principle is that we will need to leverage something called as preattentive processing. Okay, so just look at these two pictures here. So the top one we are saying attentive processing, and the bottom one we are saying preattentive processing. Okay, the difference between the top picture and the bottom picture is that information. You will not look at all the other unnecessary information. You will just look at the 5s. Okay, so this 5 which is highlighted is something called as preattentive attribute. So that is why we call as preattentive processing. In fact, in one of the very earlier KKSS sessions as well, when we were talking about the logo of Perceptive Analytics, we were talking about this concept of preattentive attributes. So that is what we leverage using the Gestalt principles when we are designing visualizations. Okay. So there are 7 principles. So first one is called as principle of enclosure. Then we have principle of similarity, continuity, closure, connection, proximity, and symmetry. So I'll go over what each of these principles means. Any questions here until now? Okay. So first is the principle of enclosure, where we say objects placed within a particular boundary are perceived as a group, and these objects are interpreted together. Okay, so that is what, if you see this picture here, you can see that these objects or these shapes are enclosed within a boundary. Okay, so the moment you look at this letter, you see this G, right? So that is because you have shaded this portion and you have enclosed this set of symbols in a shape. So that is what we call as enclosure, which helps you to perceive those objects enclosed in a particular space as belonging to the same group. So if you look at this dashboard, just see wherever there are boxes. Okay, so here we have a box in the top right corner, and then here we have a box on the left, and here at the bottom we have a set of boxes. Okay, and whatever information is represented within these boxes, we tend to perceive them as related. Okay, so the letters are a bit small over here, but I will just read it for you. So this box where it says 7 out of 10, the first bar indicates people who have basic sanitation facilities. Second bar indicates people who have lacked basic sanitation facilities, and third bar indicates people who have no sanitation facilities. So the moment you look at this particular box, you can see that all the 3 bars within this box talk about the level of sanitation that people have. Okay. Similarly, if you look at this box over here, it says 565 million is the total population, or the total rural population, out of which 32% have basic sanitation, and then 34 out of 49, that is less than 50%, 34 out of 49 countries have less than 50% access. So the moment you look at this box, you see that all the information represented within this box talks about access to sanitation out of the total population. So it starts from this population and it gives you some percentages as to what percentage have access to sanitation. So everything within this box is related. Similarly, you see the boxes at the bottom. You have one box for each region: North Africa, East, West, Middle, and South. Okay, and the bar graphs within this, each bar within each box is basically a country. Okay, so the moment you look at each box here, you will understand that each country belongs to that particular region in Africa. Okay. So like this, they have grouped everything within boxes, so that when users look at those boxes, they will know that, okay, everything that falls within that box is belonging to the same context of information. So this is the principle of enclosure. So then the next principle is the principle of similarity.
Sai, one quick thing, if you can just quickly go back. So this is an additional point that I wanted to add. See, if you look at this, let me also see if I can just quickly annotate a bit. So see, if you look at this, see, look at the following, I would say, sort of objects. Okay, one is just try to look at this particular piece. Okay, I will just remove the line so that you can see it. If you just see just that portion, right, you can see that. So first of all, maybe this is a question for you. Do you see that portion that I highlighted as a sort of a mini unit? Okay, and the reason why I'm saying that is, see, I think within that there is this particular unit. Do you see the mouse moving? No, right?
No.
Okay. So do you see this particular unit, okay, which is acting like one? This is another unit, okay, and this is another sort of subunit, and this is another unit, okay, and of course this the Africa continent itself is a different one. However, when you see all of this together, do you see one unit? Does it feel like it is somehow enclosed in something?
Right, it feels like it's put together as a one group from the rest of the bottom charts we have.
Exactly, that's right. And the reason for that is the alignment, okay? There is sort of an invisible box to which they have aligned all of these, okay? This is something that I would like you to keep in mind, that whenever you create a dashboard, so there is sort of an invisible box, and if you put it along those in that invisible box, that rectangle of sorts, then there is certain elevation of the dashboard because they all align together. Okay, I think that is exactly what is happening here in this particular box. Okay, now I would like you to look at in combination of the top box that we just talked about and the bottom boxes. Does it feel aligned or does it feel a little misaligned?
Be little misaligned, I would say, bottom compared to the top one.
Exactly. So that is because, see, you can see this, that this portion and this one, there is sort of some misalignment, okay? And the eye recognizes that, okay? It has sort of like this kind of an approach, right? So the eye recognizes, so when you remove that part, right, and if you can maybe, put a sort of a hand and look at just the top portion, the alignment is a little bit more, okay? The same thing that I would like you to also see, now include, see the title enclosure, the sort of middle box, quote unquote box that we talked about, and the bottom boxes all put together, okay? Now do you see alignment? Right, it is a little off. See, the eye can read this. This is the most important piece that I would like you to know, right? See, just like the eye was able to, or we are able to read the middle portion and see that it is aligned, right? The eye can also read the rest of it and say, hey, it is not aligned. So it has its own implications on how we perceive. Okay, so that's the only thing. See, it is an extension of the enclosure piece that Sai was talking about, that people are able to read those alignments and the boxes. Even so, let's say if this were to be the middle portion was to be a bit misaligned. So for example, you have the rural population, right? If it is a bit off, right, then we'll be able to read into that, and it has implications on the perception of quality. Okay, yeah, that's the only point I wanted to make. So Sai, please continue.
Yeah. Thanks, Yukiya. So the next principle is the principle of similarity. So similarity is where we say objects with the same color or size or shape are perceived as a group and interpreted together. Okay. And if all objects are of the same color, they will be interpreted as belonging to the same group. So for example, here you see this chart is divided into 5 sections. So one for each continent is Asia, Africa, Americas, Europe, and Oceania. Each continent is different, represented by a different color. Okay, and each box contains objects or contains countries for that particular continent, all of which are of the same color. Okay, so the moment you look at this graph, let's say you look at this particular box in the middle, the third box here, you can see that everything is of the same color. Then immediately you can understand that everything belongs to the same continent. All the countries or all the circles inside this box belong to the same continent. So similarly for each of the other continents as well. So color is one way of achieving the grouping using the concept of similarity. The other options are using size or shape. In fact, there is also when you talk about this particular metric which you used to represent, whether color or size or shape, people argue that one is more effective than the other, but I have not looked too much into detail into those details, but please, if you're interested, you can refer to those topics and as well, and get information on that. So this is the concept of similarity. And then the next principle is that of continuity.
I just do one more point, if you can just
Nice.
I'm sorry, I'm just adding.
No problem.
So see, one thing that I would like you to look at in this particular chart is, see how, like Sai mentioned, see each of the data points, right? So let me see each of the data points here. So for example, all of these, we are able to very easily sort of group together, okay? One thing that I would like to point out is look at the font color of this one, okay? And how it looks, and similarly for all the other ones as well. So the fact that this and this color is same, okay, makes it easy for you to interpret that this data, right, this particular data, that what you have, this whole chart right here, right, all of this is the label. Okay, there is also one more subtle thing that they have done here, which is that if you look at, I think, see what they have done here is that they have highlighted, okay, certain countries. Okay, so for example, you can see this is India, right? This is Ethiopia, this is Brazil, right? And so on and so forth. Okay, so what these people have done is, look at the font color of India and font color of Ethiopia, font color of Brazil. It is different from this color, okay? What you're seeing, this whatever the purple kind of a color, and also the India, Ethiopia, Brazil, Russia, right? All of these are of same color. Okay, what that achieves is that, see, on one hand they are able to sort of show that this is all, these are together. That is what this text relates to. That is sort of reasonably clear for us, number one. And number two is that because they have a different font color, they are able to highlight that, number two. And the third thing that they have been able to achieve is you can easily move from this to this to this to this to this. Okay, the ones that they want to highlight. Okay, and the fact that all these highlights are of the same color makes it easy for us to go from one to another and read those highlights. Okay, I'm not sure if this is very clear, but this is what I am reading from this. Okay, so see, read India and Ethiopia. They're of same font color and same size and so on and so forth as well, but color makes it sort of very easy. But anyway, so these are just additional thoughts I have. Please continue, Sai.
So the next principle is the principle of continuity. So here we say that the objects placed in a certain row or a certain direction are perceived as a group. Okay? And when this continuity is disturbed, users think that the object belongs to a different group. So typically in e-commerce sites, we see that even if you go to Amazon or Flipkart, on the top they have these product categories, okay? And everything will be arranged in the same row. So when we look at them, we see that we immediately get to know that all of the items on that particular row belong to the product categories. Or the other option is to have a vertical alignment. So everything in the same vertical line. When we look at them, see, so this red box that you see here is something that I have drawn to point your attention to that. But typically there will, you don't have to even enclose them in a particular box. The moment you put everything on the same row or in the same column, people will immediately understand that everything is of the same category or same context. Okay, so this is what we call as the principle of continuity. So here in the second point, when I say the continuity is disturbed, users think that the objects belong to different group. So for example, let's say they have home over here and then clothes over here, accessories somewhere else. Or for example, maybe this is home, this is accessories, this is art or something like that. So that continuity won't be there, and the user will struggle to identify what these actually mean. Okay, so that is why in order to make the user make the connection or identify the pattern easily, we put everything in the same row or the same column. So this is what we call as the principle of continuity.
Yeah, I think I really love how the background color, look at the background color for summer special jackets. Okay, so the difference between white and this color is so little, right? It is a very, very thin shade of gray, right? And the fact that, so I think the enclosure that you mentioned, Sai, is also at play here, that you can see that all the quote unquote objects, right, within that summer special jackets, that whole box, right, is very easily treated as one unit without having to put a dark color or even a border, right? It is a very thin shade that sort of differentiate. It almost seems like it is part of the same background, yet little, different only to a subtler extent, and still you are able to achieve your goal of being able to place all those in one single bucket. But the only thing is they put chairs there and they called it jackets. That's a different thing. We'll not get into that. But
I think the ink ratio that is reduced.
The ink ratio also comes down, right? And it's sort of, you treat it more like white. Okay. Same with the laptop on the right hand side. See, I mean, with that subtle, there is a sort of the boxes, and the separation between white and the boxes is very clear. Without having to be a very explicit or use a dark color, they have been able to achieve that. I think this is awesome.
So the next principle is that of closure. So here on this graph, if you see, each section is belonging to a particular year. So you have 2017, 18, 19 and 20. Okay. And what they have shown here is basically they want to show the trends as separate. So the trend for 2017 is over here, the trend for 2018 is over here, trend for 2019 is here, and trend for 2020 is over here. Okay. And when you tend to look at this sort of a picture, you automatically tend to fill in these gaps. Okay. Now, this is not an example for a perfect visualization. I'll tell you why. Okay. When you fill these gaps, what you normally tend to do is you will see this line between the end of the 2017 and the beginning of the 2018. Generally what you tend to do is you just tend to join these two lines like this. You just tend to join them in a simplistic manner. Okay. But what might have actually happened is, you see here that there's a December and then there's a February. Okay, maybe January is missing. So what might have actually happened is there might have been a spike in January, which this particular gap might not show. Okay, so this is an example of this closure, how it can possibly work against what you wish to show. Okay, so as far as possible, you try to avoid those instances where you force the user to make these connections, but rather when you show the visualization itself, you try to show those connections so that there is no ambiguity in the visualization. This is the concept of closure. And then the next concept is that of connection. So here we say that the connected objects are perceived as a single group as opposed to objects that are not connected. Okay. So connected objects here, this blue line that we have at the top or the orange line that we have at the bottom. So these are perceived as a single group. Okay. And these spots that you see here, they are not connected, and these we tend to perceive them as separate. Okay. So whatever has been connected by this line, we view it as one single group, and whatever is separate from that we view it as another group. So we even though there is only one line in this data, we perceive the data as belonging to two different groups or two different categories. So this is the principle of connection. And then the next principle is that of proximity. Now here, I couldn't find the most perfect example, so I got the symbolic representation that I'm showing. Here we say that objects placed close together are perceived together. So if you see the picture on the left, this is something like the proximity principle. If it is not applied, then how will data look like? Okay, so everything will be close together. You cannot distinguish between those different groups in the data because there are no gaps. But here, if you see, we have sufficient amount of gaps in the middle of these regions, so that we can perceive them as belonging to distinct different groups. So this is something similar to what we saw a couple of slides back as well when we were looking at the home page of that website. So each product type, like laptop or the chair, so everything was accorded its own space, and there was a slight gap between those different products, right? So that is what we say as the principle of proximity, where you can use the space between the different categories as a lever to emphasize that they belong to two different groups. Okay. So this is the principle of proximity. The last one is the principle of symmetry. So here the concept is that the symmetrical elements are perceived as part of the same group. Now you see the picture on the right, you have the blue shaded squares, right? Blue or purple shaded squares, which are placed in the same vertical line. Okay, so this placement of objects in the same vertical line and belonging to the same color, so this is a symmetrical in nature. And the other point is that these are placed in the middle. So left side you have one column, right side you have one column, in the middle you have a different column which is of a different color. So this is symmetrical about these two columns. But if you see here, if you place these two, one over here and one over here, so the user will find it difficult to draw the connection between these two boxes, these two blue boxes. So since they are belonging to the same group, we sort of distinguish them using this color and place them in the same column so that it will be easier for the user to make that connection. So this is the principle of symmetry. So yeah, those are the 7 Gestalt principles that we have. If you have any questions, you can take them. Okay, so that's all I had for today.
Yes, I just one quick question.
Yeah.
That synergy effect of logo which you said, is it applicable to dashboard as well? Or in case if it is applicable to dashboard, then how it's applicable?
See, in dashboard, I would say it depends on what sort of information that you're trying to represent. So, so imagine it's like a car, right? So a car has thousands of different moving parts, but when you put all those parts together, it moves. The car moves. Okay. So it's like when you put those parts together, you get not just the car, but you get some moving object, which transports you from one place to another. If you apply the same concept to the dashboard, it will look something like this. Okay, you have different pieces of information shown on different types of charts. Okay, but when everything is put together, they form a sentence or they form a story. Okay, so that is how you apply the synergy effect or you derive the synergy effect from a dashboard. The way you derive that story from the dashboard or the way you use the dashboard to tell a story out of the data, that is where the synergy effect happens. Did that answer the question, Jairam?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's all I had for today.